my own issues of what I would say abandonment and rejection being very significant, absolutely are triggered in relationships. And so for me, codependency is a real, that's a really accurate terminology for how I exist in a relationship. And what that often looks like is control. Now, it's not control with, a malicious intention, but it's to try and help and be the helper and fix everything, and actually have somebody else rely on me because that makes me feel needed.
Hi, my name is Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to Life Talk, the self-development podcast. On this episode, my guest is involved in work that is truly, truly close to my heart. As many of you might be aware, during my childhood, I was unfortunately a victim of child abuse. And along with my siblings, I had to witness domestic violence towards my mother. In adulthood, that's taken its toll. It's taken its toll on my life and on my relationships. But along the way, I've had the pleasure of meeting many, many inspirational people that have unfortunately had to experience childhood trauma too. The lady I speak to today on this episode is someone who I'm very lucky enough to call a friend. She's a youth development consultant, youth and community leader, a speaker, a YouTuber, and the founder of Transform UK. I'll be speaking today with Dominy Roe. Now, we're going to go on a deep dive into our childhood trauma, and we're going to resonate over the difficulties it causes in adulthood. This is, of course, a very personal episode, and some of the discussions might not be appropriate for everybody. That said, let's get to it. Today, I have a wonderful lady who I'm very excited to speak to, named Dominy Roe. Now, you've got quite a list of accomplishments here, so I'm going to read them out. No, so first and foremost, you like to be referred to as a youth development worker, not a consultant, because that sounds too fancy, right?
Yeah.
And you've got a YouTube channel, you're a speaker, and you're the co-founder of Transform UK. Anything else?
I mean, very much in my own healing journey, I think, healer. But that sounds really weird, doesn't it? That sounds like, it has certain connotations around like crystals and things like that. Not that I'm anti that, but
no, I know what you mean.
Not my field.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk to you. How are you today?
I'm excited too, Johnny. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm good. I'm well. I'm in the valleys in Wales, which is beautiful. I've got like beautiful mountains as my view. Yeah.
Although I do live in Cornwall, so I suppose
it's gorgeous there, isn't it? I'm actually normally in East London, hence why I really appreciate the little bit of greenery when it's there.
Yeah. Well, there is that. I mean, we'll get into it because I get a feeling that we're going to overrun. There's a lot to unpack. We generally never had a 5-minute conversation, so there you go. But I mean, I would like to know what your perspective is of trauma. What is trauma to you? What is your understanding and your experiences of, well, not necessarily your experiences, but what is it that you know of childhood trauma?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I know when I first used to, when I heard the word before I started to really think about my own trauma, you would often link it to like veterans, like war veterans. You'd hear the word trauma, but not necessarily. I suppose when I think about the word trauma, for me, it's about childhood trauma or really any experience growing up, particularly because obviously that's when our sort of neurological pathways are being formed. It's any experience that really sort of puts you into that mode of trauma. We were talking about off camera, but that always being in kind of fight, flight, freeze, where you're constantly on edge because you're what's happening next, and so your inner voice is constantly talking and loud, and really for me the healing journey has been about sort of trying to navigate that voice. But my own journey of childhood trauma was one of I mean, it's so interesting because I'm now 35 and I really only started talking about this stuff a few years ago, which I just get so angry about. You know, I'm like, what on earth? How could I go through my whole education and nobody really sit down and say, look, at some point, this might be something you want to look at. But nonetheless, so when I was younger, I had quite a significant amount of abuse in my childhood. So my mum had 5 girls, 4 different dads. My dad I never knew, and she had a mental health breakdown when I was 12 years old, so I was the eldest. And at that point she left. She went off with a boyfriend at the time, and we all went into different care placements, and that was then my journey in the care system. But prior to that, I'd experienced a significant amount of violence, addiction in the house, you know, mental health issues, arguments. I myself had been physically and sexually abused. So it for me, I mean, I do joke because, you know, how else do you deal with it?
That's what we spoke about, wasn't it?
Yeah, every single trauma. You know, I work with young people now, as you mentioned, and we talk about the toxic trio, and it's kind of the 3 identifying sort of factors that make for a really toxic environment for a child. And it's anything from kind of violence, mental health, you know, significant mental health issues with a parent or an addiction or something. And I definitely had, you know, the quadruple or whatever the number would be, you know, for those. But yeah.
Sorry, so one of the things that I said to you, I binge watched your YouTube channel, and I came away from that like I had this like almost like a fanboy. Like I had this like, wow, I feel like I know this girl so much more even, and it's crazy because we've had a few, like, you know, a handful of interactions in the past in person. You know, you came to Cornwall that time, and we had that nice lunch that we had. But it's just, you know, obviously they were never the sort of situations where you can sit and talk about things like that. I mean, one of the things I heard in that is, and I experienced it myself with my own experience of domestic violence, and that is a couple of things. One is that acceptance, isn't it? It's that feeling of it's not fair. It's not fair. Why did this happen to me? Why did everyone else get to have this normal upbringing? Why did I spend my entire childhood terrified? You know, why did that happen? I mean, where are you on your journey in relation to that?
No, I think that's really good. I think I am definitely still learning acceptance in the respect that my own issues of what I would say abandonment and rejection being very significant, absolutely are triggered in relationships. And so for me, codependency is a real, you know, that's a really accurate terminology for how I exist in a relationship. And what that often looks like is control. Now, it's not control with, you know, a malicious intention, but it's to try and help and be the helper and fix everything. And actually have somebody else rely on me because that makes me feel needed, and that makes me feel like they're not going to leave, and, you know, they're going to stay around. And so it very much is a survival technique, and certainly one that, as I look back through my 20s and my 30s so far, I've implemented in all relationships, whether it be romantic, professional, you know, in my work life. I can see how it's played out. But I would definitely say I'm in a space now where I am on the healing journey. You know, I've done a lot of therapy, I've done a lot of reading, I've done a lot of engaging with YouTube content and various seminars and podcasts. And I actually came to faith when I was 27 years old. So I have you know, quite a significant spiritual life, prayer life, going to church, engagement with sort of church community and so on. But yeah, I definitely, for me, the healing is still there. You know, I came out of a relationship just a couple of months ago, and I'm just like, I beat myself up all the time that I'm like, how did I go back to that place? I was single for 6 years. You know, you talked about my YouTube videos. Actually, when I recorded those at the beginning of this year, I had been single for such a long time that I was like, nothing's going to get me. This is it. I'm healed. I'm going to have the most wholesome relationship there is. It's going to be so healthy. We're going to break cycles together, you know. And actually, it was just that real humbling experience of like, no, this is a constant I have to constantly be vigilant of these
Part of the learning, isn't it?
potential factors. Absolutely.
I mean, we were saying just before, it doesn't stop. I have something I call my dad default. When I wake up in the morning, I have that feeling of worthlessness, that you're going to embarrass yourself. Who do you think you are? All of these really strong embedded emotions that were given to me as a child. And I used to try and battle them back every day, or just ignore them, which is, as you may have experienced, is not happening. So what I've learned to do is every morning when I open my eyes is I just allow them emotions to come in. I don't attach myself to them. I don't try to make sense of them. I just let them come in and pass through. And then I immediately look for evidence surrounding me to not support them feelings. So my lovely wife, my kids, my home life, that all the stability that I've strived all my life to create and to get. And as we identified, and as it sounds like you're saying, one of the hardest things to come to terms with is there's no self-help book, there's no mentor out there that's going to make this go away. It is us, it's you, it's me, working on ourselves every day, for every moment of the day. As you rightly said a moment ago, every interaction, every situation, we have to go into it more vigilant than others, because we have that tendency to go off down that we grew up in an environment where we were scared all the time. So that developed hypersensitivity within us. It developed things that are always there. They don't go away. And sometimes it helps to have a drink to get rid of them into certain situations, but that's no real cure going forward, is it? But I mean, this is
we all have our vices though, don't we? And I think it's important to be honest about that. I think it's often about just finding a healthier option or a healthier choice that makes it a bit easier to come to terms with the vices. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I know has happened to me is I have, believe it or not, I have trouble with deep, meaningful connections. I resonate with people all the time. I'm able to. What makes me good at my job is being able to empathize and understand people on a level, sometimes, very often, more than they understand themselves, and be able to really help them and support them. But how would you say that your childhood trauma has affected you as an adult? What are the things that you sort of started on that a minute ago? What are the things that flagged up for you?
Yeah. Just to pick up on something you said as well, Johnny, about this idea of kind of first thing in the morning when you wake up, the voices that bombard you. I think that it literally is like that, isn't it? It's straight away. And I think it's something that I found really useful. I mean, we talk a lot about sort of health and fitness and exercise, and don't get it twisted. You joked about drinking. My vice was smoking. I was a smoker from the age of 12. It's something that I still battle with in terms of an addiction, despite my really healthy, I love my exercise now. But I was never always like that. But also, I think something I've learned, which has been really crucial, is about, because it's given me back a bit of power about this stuff. It's about reprogramming some of these neurological pathways. And actually, science shows us that the first 30 minutes when we wake up in the morning, we're really susceptible to these neural pathways. And actually, there's a real opportunity to get in there with the affirmations and the meditations and the da-da-da-da-das. And don't get, again, some mornings I wake up and I've gone on Insta straight away, and an hour later I'm still on Insta. Let's just be real, that's how it is for us. But I think that I definitely notice, and unfortunately now the days where I don't do that are definitely fewer, and the days where I wake up and go, right, meditation on, affirmations on, exercise, they are the days where I know that I'm my most productive, and where it's easier to win the battles. Do you know what I mean? It's like I've got my armor on, and it's not the armor of kind of survival skill armory, which is what I'd grown up and adapted and learned to have. It's actually, I think it puts me in a position where I can handle the vulnerability. I can take on I can identify a trigger and go, that's a trigger. Why is it triggering me? How do I respond in the best way? Do you know? Again, I don't always get it right.
No. Of course you don't.
But
having that understanding of yourself, I mean, that's what we didn't have as children, isn't it?
Yeah.
We were trained to be hypervigilant because that was what protected us as children. But unfortunately, as a grown-up, when you take that hypervigilant into other situations, it's disastrous. Like we were saying, you can be in we go to a conference or a seminar,
and everything going on around you is just bombarding you at another level. Whereas that was there before to keep you safe as a kid. You'd be sat as a, I don't know, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, looking around the room, looking for triggers that of things that might have happened in the past. Or when dad comes back, he's like this, so I want to be over here, or I want to make sure my mum's all right, or my brother's all right, or whatever. And all that stuff it stays with you, doesn't it? And
right. And it's so significant. And I think actually, we have to be so honest about this, that as adults that haven't had a foundation of love and affirmation and validation spoken into us, and in fact we've had the furthest from it, because let's be real, not everybody has that perfect parents set up, do they, where they
as a parent myself, I realize how hard it is now.
Sure. And I don't yet have kids, but seeing my nieces and nephews and friends' children absolutely agree. Like, I'm like, oh my days, I'm so glad I don't have them yet, as selfish as it is.
No, well, I mean, there's something you said in your YouTube video. I think you quoted Mary J. Blige, where she said that she
reparenting herself. Right?
Oh man, that touched me on another level. That did. That really did make sense to me.
Me too. Remark. So just for people that are watching, what she said is, somebody in an interview asked her, if you ever regretted not having kids, or do you want to have kids? I think she must be like in her 50s now. I mean, she still looks amazing, doesn't she? Well. But who knows how old she is? She could be like 70 or something. But anyway, she said, I'm still learning to be a parent to myself.
Yeah.
And until I can do that, I don't feel that I would be a responsible human to be a parent to anyone else. And honestly, Johnny, it hit me in a hard place, because that is so true. And, I laugh and joke about it, but that is, for me, that is an absolute truth. It really is. Now, I don't think anyone is like ever prepared to be a parent in the way that it then turns out to be. And I
worry about the people that think they are.
Right. And I don't think any parent no parent wakes up and goes, I want to be a bad parent, do they? Like, everybody wants to do the best job they can. But I truly believe if we haven't, and we're not in a place of identifying our own emotional, mental, physical, etc. needs, then how we can be available for anyone else in the way that we need to be the sort of best version of a parent, or to be a whole parent, which, by the way, doesn't look like perfection, but it does look like being vulnerable and admitting when you make a mistake and so on. And to be there, you have to be so aware of yourself, don't you? So
and anyway, that's what we probably fear that to a certain degree, because that idea of looking into yourself, like, one of the reasons that I went for a therapeutic journey myself, and one of the reasons I put it off was because, frankly, I didn't want to revisit that at all. Like,
me too.
I did,
and I was scared of having. I was literally like, I was actually in my professional career quite successful. I was a youth worker, and I was doing well and climbing the ladder, and and I didn't want to have a mental health breakdown. And that is what I remember my very first therapy session saying. That I was 31 years old, and I said, I've always known I needed to do this, but I was so scared of what might happen that I haven't. And that was the honest truth. And it still is, like, it's still like, I might have a breakdown tomorrow. And
but it's like, like I said, like, I find you incredible. Your ability to be able to be so self-aware and to be vulnerable and own some of the stuff that you might not like about yourself, or certain traits that you have that get in your way. I say that because it happens to me all the time. Like, our abilities to care about people, we need to measure that, and we need to reel that in, because we really, really, really do like to helping people so much that we can take on their problems. which is
yeah. And the question you asked was, how do I see my trauma playing out in adulthood? And unfortunately for me, it has massively played into my romantic relationship. So throughout my 20s, I was in some very unhealthy relationships. Fortunately, none that involved violence to that level, but it kind of it really hit me hard when I was 27 years old, and I ended up in a relationship with a recovering drug addict who was actually still using. And although they were on the journey of addiction recovery, they were still using. And for me, what I identified was just this absolute chaos, this emotional chaos of, like, waking up every day hysterically crying, not knowing who to turn to, not knowing where to go. He would relapse, and And I remember at that point I was with Codependence Anonymous, Families Anonymous. I was going to some AA meetings to, you know, and actually the 12 steps as a principle and a kind of map for doing life, I think it has some brilliant stuff in it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all stuff around acknowledging each day what we could have done differently and where our pain might have played into a situation. But for me, that just identifying that, like, all I was doing was repeating these cycles of unhealthy, toxic, emotional, insecure behaviors, and that also it is by the grace of God that I didn't get pregnant and have children in my 20s. And I honestly believe that, because it certainly wasn't because I was intentional or sensible. You know, in all honesty, for me, sex and that part of my physical kind of body had been something that had always been abused, and that I'd always put myself in abusive situations. But while some of these, don't get me wrong, you know, the relationships themselves, the men themselves, then they weren't necessarily awful men. Even the guy that was struggling with addiction, the point was I was so attracted to these relationships because they resembled what I was comfortable with. So I had, you know, a quite successful professional career at this point. I had wonderful friends. I've always been so blessed by the friendships that I have. You know one of them very well.
I'm thinking about right now.
I mean, honestly, angel sent from heaven.
Really,
like, but this is the thing. Like, but I would then be in these crazy relationships, and I wouldn't even recognize who I was. You know, the woman that I would be in these relationships was nothing like how I would be at work or in my friendships. And what I realized was happening is that actually what happens is there's all of this amazing stuff, and you probably have heard of it, and I'm sure some of your listeners have, around attachment theory. But in our first 0 to 6 years, we develop these kind of pathways around attachment and learn how to attach to people, and particularly figures that are supposed to be safe for us, right? So for instance, our parents. And if those figures or those adults around us have not been safe, then actually what's created in us is a false sense of safe when we're in these toxic or unhealthy patterns. And it's why it feels so, it's why you know, for me, I always felt like, but there's such a deep connection, you know, we really understand each other. It's like soulmates. And I hear that language all the time now from women that I work with. And we can really start to identify what that is. And actually what that is it goes right back to some of the feelings that we felt in our parent-child dynamic. And actually now as an adult, we can start to reprogram, and we can start to be a parent to the little person, you know, inner child stuff, which again sounds crazy. And I would just think that was for crazy people. But I've really started
to, like, crazy to people that don't need it.
Right,
when you say it, I'm like, yeah.
Because there's a little person inside of us. And what I realized through therapy is that, you know, when we are triggered emotionally, when we feel insecure, when our rejection issues or abandonment or whatever it might look like, fear of violence or emotional erraticness, when we're triggered in that way, what happens is that we respond in a way where we expect the person to meet the needs for us, you know, or expect somebody else to be there for us. And certainly that was my experience of relationships. And so I was just so unhealthy. And like I said, you know, only in the last couple of months have I come out of a relationship, which again wasn't an awful guy at all, a lovely man, like lots of lovely things. But what I identified again was that these codependent tendencies of, this was a man with potential, and I could fix them, you know. And it was, I'm just like, Dom, man, you've done all this work, you've come this far, and you're still going into these situations where you think you're going to be the rescuer. And that's fine within a like professional context, and that served me really well. But actually for a life partner, you know, somebody that might be the parent to my children that I want to go through life with, do I want to be in a position where I'm always having to, like, you know, look after them and meet their emotional needs, and there's nothing in return? No, I don't, you know. So some of my, sorry honey, I was just going to finish and say, some of my journey has been really about learning my own needs. You know, they were never met for me as a child, and what do I need to every day be vigilant about in terms of what I need, and how do I meet that for myself so I don't expect it from others.
But
you
I'd
know.
imagine as well, there's an element of learning to be okay with that, because that might feel like really alien to you or I, to actually self-care in some way and to give ourselves what we need to move forward. I've had a lot of issues surrounding imposter syndrome and self-sabotage. You know, I've had a lot of really wonderful opportunities in my life, and you know, I'll just do something really silly just before it, and my wife would be like, "Why did you do that?" And I'd be like, "I don't know." And I realize it's because it's that deep sense of, I don't deserve this. You know, I'm worthless. I'm useless. I'm making a fool of myself. Who am I to believe I can do these things? And you know, as we identified at the beginning of this interview, the work never goes away. It's every day. The work is every day. And at first, I found that frustrating. But then I thought, well, I don't get frustrated about brushing my teeth every day. You know, I don't get frustrated about brushing. Oh, I don't brush my hair anymore.
No, but you have a big pro, Johnny. I can.
I know. But as it crept back, I thought I'd just go with it. You know, I thought I'd embrace it. You know, but I mean, just to close this thing down, which I'm sad to say because I love talking to you. You talked about breaking the cycle and moving forward. And again, this is all just our opinion, our education, our reading, and our experience. But moving forward in a positive direction, breaking the cycle, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think for me, the one of the most powerful things has been owning my story and seeing the power in my pain. Like really understanding that actually I can translate that, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not a flipping Instagram meme. You know, it's real life. It's hard work. It looks like getting up every day and being really intentional, but actually, you know, Brene Brown talks a lot about vulnerability and how to have sort of whole relationships, or to be a sense of whole, you know, what that might look like in parenting and in romantic relationships. And essentially the crux of it is this: it's that you are self-aware enough that you recognize when you make a mistake, and you go and you take responsibility for it. And in doing so, you do, you know, incrementally you create this connection and this intimacy with someone, as opposed to what I did for my whole life, which was stuff down any sense of issues or anything that I felt was, you know, whatever, that wasn't going to serve me, and actually used all my survival skills to serve and meet everyone else's needs and be this person and be this person, not recognizing what I needed, and therefore not understanding when I made a mistake or not taking responsibility, because I would be like, no, but I did all of this. What do you mean I did that wrong? What do you mean you feel like it's control? No, it's not, you know. And actually just really own what it is to be you. Because one thing that I've really, and this is a journey of embracing this, Johnny. This isn't something I would say I feel it now, but something I'm definitely learning is like, no one else has the power that I have because of my story, you know, because of my ability to be authentic and to connect and to talk about this stuff in a normal way that relates to normal people. Like, do you know what I mean? And I think I've just got to really start to own that, because as you said, the self-sabotage is real. You know, I launched that YouTube series back at the beginning of this year, and it's all of the imposter syndrome that comes after something like that. It's on the way to success, all of the mental blocks and barriers, and success in whatever way we define it, you know. But certainly I think, yeah, it's understanding the power that is in my pain and being intentional about working on that.
So, I mean, when we talk about breaking the cycle, do you agree that basically we don't want to pass this on to any other generation, whether it be our kids, whether it be our brother and sister's kids, whatever? It's just about breaking that cycle. Yeah,
absolutely. And like, you know, I'm so blessed during this season of COVID. I've spent loads of time with my sister, and she's actually what you would say half sister, I guess, because she had a different dad, but we've never seen it like that. We didn't grow up together, so my relationship with all my sisters is slightly different. But in our adulthood, we've established a relationship, and she's got children. She's got 3 little children, and I've been living with her for a while. And honestly, Johnny, she is such an incredible mum. She shows up. She's so present. She plays. She engages with their feelings. She does all of this stuff, and I'm just like, I can see these little people that are like, we're just so well-rounded, confident, assertive.
And the truth is, as a parent, you don't always feel like it. You don't always feel like engaging, like you don't in any other thing. But being able to just stop yourself, take yourself out of the equation and go, what does this child need? That's something that requires a lot of strength.
I mean, and a lot of sacrifice, and I don't know how you guys do it, but
well, I have a Caroline. She's
oh, in it. Yeah. I mean, big up Caroline. She is incredible, isn't she? You're very lucky.
She's the first relationship I ever had where I felt like it was for me, and I didn't have to do any fixing. So
amazing. Wow.
In my eyes, she fixes me. But listen, I hate to say this, but we have to stop. I just want you to know that I have a lot of respect for you, and I cannot wait until you start to see yourself the way that everyone else does. Because when that happens, that's power right there.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. I've got so much respect for you as well. You know, as a man in this space, it's really not easy. I mean, we didn't even touch today on the racial side of things, but I would love to have gone there. But, yeah. But, you know, I think that I honestly, I think you're incredible, and it's so brave and so courageous, and lives are being changed, right? So yeah,
and that's the intention. The intention is, I know on your side and mine is to help at the end of the day. That's why I did this. And you know, I don't find this thing, you know, people think, oh, you're always on these things now, and it's like, yeah, and every single time I feel sick just before I do it. So you know, it's just what it is, you know. And I do it because of the messages I get privately, and I know you get them too. When you tell your story and you give comfort to someone else, or you give some sort of little gem that helps them in some way, it has more value than any amount of money you can give. It really does, you know. But anyway, before we get off on it again, we'll do this again, I'm sure. But I just want to say thank you, and yeah, look after yourself and speak to you soon.
You too. Lots of love, Johnny. Bye.